All right, live again. It must be Friday. So I've actually gone to trouble of making some notes for this week. Written them down in my journal. Got it here so you can see. Obviously, it just looks like a black blob, but hey, written a few things down. I want to continue last week's conversation, and I've also got some ideas of what I want to do with this video afterwards as well, which I might share at the end. And it'll all kind of tie together. You'll see how everything I talk about today and everything I'm doing right now kind of go hand in hand. And well, let's just kick it off. Let me bring up my slides. So to kind of I guess kick this off. This is in my head. This has become sort of halfway between me delivering a full-on presentation with slides and a kind of off the cuff, just whatever comes in my head kind of thing. So it's somewhere in between. But I have mapped out a few notes, as I said. This is very much for, I would say, when I started out, I was talking to a friend about this earlier this week. I had a real desire to share ideas with people that would, in some way, if you like, transform their life or enhance the quality of their life. And that was what it was all about. And so, out of that one thought, then pushed me into a position where I was like, well, I can't do that one on one because obviously, if I'm sharing ideas one on one, I've only got one lifetime. I'm not going to reach that many people. So then it was like, well, how do I get leverage? And so beyond that, it was like, okay, well, can I do that from stage? Can I put X number of people in a room, or go into a room where there's X number of people, share an idea, and then instead of it being one on one, then it's one too many. So if there's 10 people in the room, I'm impacting 10 people. If there's 100 people, and so on and so on and so on. So that's how it all started. So this presentation really, or these insights, these notes, as I say, a continuation of last week, but also very much, I guess, aimed at people who, like me, are very much driven by wanting to make an impact. So you're wanting to make a difference as much as you want to, as much as you might want to make a profit and an income as well. So that's important. I think it's the two things that go hand in hand. And I'll touch on that a little bit more because there's things I see that happen online when you're not coming from that place, which means the strategy, if that's the right word, certainly the tactics that some people use are incongruent. They're out of alignment with what I believe we as people who want to make an impact should be doing. So that's where this is coming from. So inside of that, of course, as I got better, I've got my slides. I've got some slides. I'll put this up because I think this is relevant. I started out, I wanted to share ideas. I got into NLP, neuro linguistic programming, because originally because when I was in Australia, I was on a diving trip, met a guy there called Ed Straker. He introduced me to NLP, or something called NLP. And when I got back off the diving trip, I read Tony Robbins' book, Unlimited Power, and I read Richard Bandler's book, Frogs into Princes, I think it's called. And I read those, and I was like really inspired by both these books, and it really put me on a different path. So all gratitude to Ed for kind of sharing that insight with me. I mean, all insight, all gratitude to whatever the bigger picture is in terms of being on that diving trip in the first place. But so I did all of that. And so NLP gave me the tools to really help people transform their mindset. It also gave me an insight into something way more powerful, which has been a guiding thought since, which is this idea of modeling success. So if someone's getting a result that you want, go model what they're doing, and then you can borrow from that. And more importantly, from my experience, not only borrow from it, learn to find ways to enhance it and to improve it. Like I'm a big fan of, if you like, cross-pollination. So the idea that I will take ideas from a number of different sources, I will combine them in ways which maybe haven't been combined before to use them in a situation where they haven't been used before. And that's where I come from with a lot of this. So I got into the whole NLP thing. I then decided, okay, I want to share more of this. And as a way to do that, I'd run a couple of NLP events. And then I was like, okay, I want to reach more people. So I ran an advert in the Evening Standard. I think I've shared this before, where, the advert, this is way before the internet, or certainly before online advertising. And the advert was successful, cost me a small fortune. And 70 people turned up to hear me speak on a Tuesday night in a hotel in Victoria. And, so the cost of the advert, the cost of the room, the cost of all the AV equipment, all that kind of stuff. And then I did a 2-hour presentation. And at the end of it, I said, I'm doing this event. Come on this event. Here's how much it costs. Go sign up at the back of the room. Nobody bought. So that was both embarrassing, annoying, incredibly frustrating, and also on the surface what a complete waste of money, because all that money gone in, you can't run a business if you're putting that kind of money out and you're not getting nothing back. But at the same time, I'm a great believer that we learn from our experiences, or we should learn from our experiences. Maybe there's an element in there of accepting that you are going to make mistakes and that the purpose of mistakes is to ultimately help you. I think as long as you can stay focused on your vision, then you will move forward and you will find the right pieces, if you like, the pieces of the puzzle. Hopefully some of what I share today will be part of the pieces of the puzzle for you, and I believe they will, which will help you ultimately get to where you want to be. And within that, there will be times where you invest money and it doesn't work out. There'll be times where you invest money and it turns out to be an incredible return for you. And there are times where you'll invest a lot of time and it doesn't work out, or you invest time and it does work out. So all those things happen. The key is what's your vision, stay focused on it. And then, of course, it's like, okay, skills, strategies, tactics to help you get there. So that's what this is about. Now, what I haven't shared before as much is when I did that first event, I went away, I wrote in my journal, and obviously, several pages of 4-letter words, which I don't want to repeat. But eventually, once I got all that out of my system, then what I did write was, how do people make a buying decision? And that was a very powerful question for me. And that forced me to go down a number of different paths to really understand how to answer that question. So that got me started. I started using my modeling approach, right, from NLP, with particularly American pitch speakers in the beginning, because they were really the only people that were doing that kind of thing in any depth, in any detail, and had any experience in it. Nobody else really was doing it. It was just starting in the UK. So I really hammered into that, got very good at it, and obviously beyond that, did very well with it. Things changed and it's almost like, I guess, the evolution of the seminar industry in the UK. As things shifted, then of course there were promoters. So promoters started appearing, wanting to put on these huge events. So, in the beginning, like right at the beginning, when I was doing some of the early events, I was literally doing 2 events a day, but there'd be maybe, 20, 30, 40, 50 people in the room at a time. So my thinking behind that was very simple. It's like I wrote a new presentation. I didn't want to put 400 people in a room and have the presentation bomb, because that would be a big mistake again. What was easier for me was to go, look, why don't I put 40 people in the room, do the presentation? And so rather than having 400 all at once, have 10 lots of 40 and keep improving the presentation. And that's what I did. And I recommend that today. Like, I've got someone I'm helping at the moment, and I said exactly that to him. He wanted to put, 400 people on a webinar. And I'm like, does your presentation work? Have you really nailed it? Have you really got it down? Because actually it'd be better for you to put 40 people on a webinar and do 10 lots of that and refine it and keep refining it until you nail it. And that'd be far better for you. But of course, impatience gets in the way. Like, impatience is a disease in that respect. It's like, you got to learn to manage your impatience and do it step by step by step. As you've heard me speak before, you've heard me pitch before, then you'll know that one of my key frames is this idea that, the next 3 years is going to pass. You can't stop time. Whatever you do, 3 years is going to pass. 3 years from now, we will be 3 years further ahead. But where you are in 3 years comes down to the decisions you make today, the actions you start today. So that idea of, well, manage your impatience, because you can be in an incredibly strong position in a year. Actually, if you use what I share with you today, you're probably in an incredibly strong position within a couple of months. But it's that whole thing of, the time's going to pass anyway. Be patient, take it step by step, and grow it. Because today you do 40 people, in a few months you could be doing 400 people. Beyond that, you could be doing 5,000 people. So the big promoters started arriving, and that meant being on a stage, not just in terms of a bigger audience, so like 4,000 people in the room, for example, or some of the smaller events where there are 500 or 800 people in a room, but also they were multi-speaker. So I went from originally sort of modeling pitch speakers who were running their own small events, delivering to their own audience, and that was it. There was one presentation and that was it, to being in an environment where the people in the audience were listening to 2, 3, 4 days of 90-minute speakers, all getting up and all doing a pitch. Now, of course, at the beginning, that was all fine from an audience perspective. They'd not seen it before. But from a speaker perspective, all of a sudden, it wasn't like, is my presentation going to work? It's also, how do I differentiate myself from every other speaker? Because all of a sudden, everybody in the audience had choice. They hadn't specifically said they wanted to come and hear my presentation. they specifically said they wanted to come and hear ideas from a multitude of speakers with potentially different perspectives, different approaches, different ideas, different vehicles, and they were going to decide, if they decided at all, to pick one of those. I mean, okay, sometimes some people pick two, but for the most part, people pick one. So suddenly I'm in an environment where this changed the dynamic, in the sense of, it was not just, is my presentation work? It's like, can I also position myself against all the other speakers so that they favor me rather than them? Now, I will say right from the beginning, I have always found, because of this, that there are a number of people, speakers, both live and now on webinar, who are very focused on tactics. So the whole kind of scarcity play, all of that, that's a tactic. Scarcity is a very powerful tool, but it's a tactic. I have always been of the opinion, and this has been absolutely proven through experience and research and everything I've looked at, that I would rather focus on trust and rapport and credibility. In other words, those are the strong foundations of everything. Like, for somebody to ultimately buy from you, they need to, one, like you. Actually, that isn't always the case, but if they do like you, it's a serious advantage. So to be likable is a major advantage. They absolutely need to believe that you can help them get a result that they want. Otherwise, they wouldn't buy at all. If they were like, well, I'd like to get to this place in my life, but I don't believe you can help me, so I'm going to buy from you. That just doesn't happen. So you got to understand those are the foundations. And I've always focused on that. And I think partly it was an extension of my personality anyway. I like people. I want to be liked for the most part. And I think that's okay in a certain dose. It's healthy. It's when you start worrying too much about what people think or whether they like you, it becomes unhealthy and becomes a disease. And I see a lot of that as well. It gets in the way. It interferes with people's confidence. But likability is an important factor. If you've ever read Cialdini's work, the sort of original book he wrote on influence, where he talks about his 6 triggers of influence, one of them is likability. So that definitely plays a part. So I've always played to the fundamentals. It's like trust and rapport and credibility. Now, as I started to be successful in that environment, and I could position myself against other speakers very well, so all of a sudden I was like, this is working. And one of the things you don't always see, particularly at these multi-speaker events, is you might see somebody do a great presentation using a lot of heavily loaded tactics, and you'll get people in the moment going, oh, I want this. It's a bit like a feeding frenzy. They're rushing to it. They're taken on by the wave of the hype and the social proof of other people running. But then the day after, they regret it, and then they ask for a refund. Now, the whole point of being able to serve people is that they come on a journey with me. So if I use a certain set of tactics which get me a good result in the moment on the surface, and it looks good in terms of, oh, look at me as a speaker, I got more sales than all the other speakers, but then most of those people refund the next day. That doesn't serve anybody. That's not helpful at all. And so you don't always see that if you're outside of that industry. I've seen it a lot, because I've seen the speakers that rely heavily on tactics, and they might do well in the moment, but I also know what their refund rates are like. So across the board, it doesn't pay. So actually, it's better to use what I call invisible influence, and that's really what I want to get into. So everything that happens before you ask for the money. And so I want to share some of the key elements of how I've made that work. Because I will say as well, once I went from just doing live stage audience in front of me to doing webinars, and I've done very well with webinars, but as more and more people have done webinars, as a whole concept of using webinars has become more and more common, then of course there are people that again have been very tactic driven, have delivered in a lot of cases, either very little or almost completely devoid of any value in their presentation. It's just pitch, 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 pitch. And so people get switched off by that, which then, of course, they don't, like human beings generalize. So they don't go, well, it was that particular person that delivered that particular presentation on that particular webinar. They go, webinars. All it is a pitch fest. So people trying to pitch, pitch, pitch. So again, even more so, as I've gone online, as I've done more webinars, as webinars have become more common, as too many people in that niche, in those different niches, not just internet marketing niche, but other niches as well, coaching niches, health niches, all these things, have used webinars and used them badly, have been very tactic focused, then of course it creates a bad vibe for all of us. So then you got to kind of go, well, how do I combat that? How do I deal with that? So it was another problem to solve. Now, as it happened, I was fortunate that because I've always focused on fundamentals, then the solution was inside the fundamentals again. So it was very much like, okay, look, I went from my own events to multi-speaker events, position against other speakers, to coming online, position against all of the objections to webinars, all of the bad webinar presentations that have been done. How do you then get around all of that? And that's what I want to share. That's what I'm calling invisible influence. So as I said, I've got some notes. I want to make sure that I cover them. So actually, let me just I've got a slide, and I want to get to the key piece of this and show you what this will do for you, because it's very powerful, it's very interesting. And okay, let me share screen, share a window. Here we go. Okay, so as I said, this was how I started. That was kind of the beginning of what I was talking about. My whole thing has always been centered around this one question: how do people make a buying decision? And then, as I said, I did my first event, did my multi-speaker event. Where's the slides? Let me move those on. Bump. Right, so we get to invisible influence. So, as I mentioned last week, here's where you ask for the money. Here's everything which happens before you ask for the money. And then, of course, there's the response you get. So you want a positive response for the most part. Then there's a couple of things in this, which I'm going to start sharing already, is that the response you get isn't just about, can I get as many people as possible to buy? You need to, first of all, change that thought, because it's not about how many people buy, it's how many of the right people buy. In other words, first of all, you have every right to decide what kind of customers you want to work with. And secondly, not every customer is equal. So there will be some people who will buy from you, and they will be the wrong people. And I'll give you a quick example of this. And also the quick example helps highlight why I wanted to share this as well. So over this year, as I've said before, I've helped a few friends out with their online advertising. And what's been really interesting in the course is they were coming from a place where most of what they'd done has been word of mouth driven, has been organically driven. And they've done a lot of, I guess, one-to-one type, get people on a phone, talk to them, and they have a package that they offer. And that's all been great, and it works for them. So then this week, based on those experiences, there was kind of some real obvious gaps for them. Like, I agreed to help, and I said, look, I'll help you out. I'll help you sort this out. And when I got into it, there was several things that were missing. One, they didn't actually have a customer acquisition process that was proven, that was working. So without that, running adverts and just saying, okay, let's run some adverts isn't going to do anything, because all you're going to do is generate traffic. As I've said before, you don't have a traffic problem, you have a conversion problem. So you can run traffic, but then you're not going to get the results you want because you haven't got that acquisition process in place, tested, working, and also profitable. Like, there are things you can do organically where you're putting in your time, so it's not costing you a lot of money. And then you can say, okay, who wants to jump on a call with me in some form? And you get people on a call. And so, but that doesn't necessarily translate to working when you're paying for advertising, where all of a sudden there's a cost to getting somebody on the call. So it changes the dynamic completely. The other side of it is that as I was helping these people and also talking to friends of mine who spend their whole life doing this kind of stuff, so media buying or media planning, for the most part, the good guys in that industry and girls, they won't take on a client that doesn't have a proven funnel. So, and I was discovering why, because there are so many gaps in this. Like, to have a funnel that works profitably, you need decent ads. You need a whole acquisition process that works. You need a way to recoup your advertising costs as quickly as possible, because obviously that's going to have an impact on your cash flow. And so all that needs to be in place. And you need as well to have something that you can prove people actually want and they're going to buy. So most agencies, if they're decent agencies, if you come to them and say, look, I want to sell this, they go, okay, so how many sales have you made? Morning, Rajesh. How many sales have you made? How long have you been doing this? You say, well, I haven't. I've just got this idea and I want to test it. Like, okay, yeah, go do that on your own. You don't need us yet. You're going to waste a lot of money. And all that's going to happen is you're not going to get the result you want. And then who are you going to blame? Ghostbusters? No, you're going to blame me because you're not getting the result and you're giving me money. whereas actually it's because it's too early stage. So that's a challenge for people. And I was discovering this, and I was literally helping out. So I was and have been the media planner, the media buyer. So the media planner is the person who's going like, which audiences should we go for? So I've been the media planner, the media buyer, and the copywriter for these people. It's like they're all full-time jobs and they're all rolled into me. And it's a challenge, a real challenge. And that's why media companies, these agencies, they won't take people on like that. So there's me go, well, I want to help people out. I want to help a couple of friends out. And then all of a sudden, I hadn't thought about it because I didn't realize this comes from experience. I'm helping these people out and going, hold on a minute. If I'm the media planner and I'm the media buyer and I'm the copywriter, whose business is it? Mine, really, because that's effectively what I'm doing. I'm building their whole business. It's like me that's going, okay, let's test these audiences. And let's get into the advertising strategies that are going to work, blah, 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 blah. So all that's been going on. And I've made it work. So that's been the important part. But then this week, another friend of mine had posted saying, he wanted somebody, what he was really asking for was somebody to be a media buyer, a junior media buyer at that, someone who would place ads. That's what I thought he was asking for. But I said, just to clarify, are these ads already written? Is the media plan already created? Do you know exactly who you're going for? Do you already have an acquisition funnel that works so that it's proven? Do you know what your profit is out the back end from the front end? No. And again, he was sort of saying, well, thanks for the distinctions. I appreciate I needed those. But it's that thing. So you're kind of caught in this place where you've got an idea. You maybe have had some sales through word of mouth or organic, but you haven't got a proven funnel. So to want to hire someone to do that means, one, agencies are not going to look at you because it's a disaster waiting to happen from their perspective. So then you're left to kind of go, well, do I go get someone who is just a media buyer and do I write my own ads? Or do I want someone who fully understands media planning so they can actually get the right targeting and the right audiences and tell me what to do and how to set up the retargeting and how to effectively do the retargeting and all that kind of stuff, in which case you do need somebody with a team, really. So there's a lot of money involved in that. And you've got to accept that could take 3 months of putting money out before you see anything back. And that's a challenge. Like, if somebody came to me today, and I'm not an agency and I don't want to be, but if somebody came to me today and said, oh, I've got this proven funnel, I've done some testing, we've run some ads, we've managed to get it working, now we need to grow it. Like, well, that's easy. I could pretty much say, well, let me have a look at it, have a quick look at it, ask him a couple of questions, and I could basically, if everything, all the boxes were ticked, I could turn around and say, yep, I can get you a massive return in 30 days quite easily. Because everything's proven. All I've got to now do is leverage my skills in terms of growing it, scaling it a little bit. That's why you'll see some agencies, that's why they'll advertise and say, we can guarantee your results. Because they're going to have a conversation with you to make sure you're the right fit for them. So this was all to say, you don't just want any client, you want the right clients. And you get to ask that. But attracting the right clients is part of this. It's part of everything which happens before you ask for the money. So within your invisible influence, you can actually tailor to filter for the clients you want and repel the clients you don't want. And hopefully that should give you a clue where we're going with this. Now, did I create another slide? I can't remember. Oh, I did. Oh, yes. Oh, this takes us to this nicely, actually. We'll jump around. We'll jump around a little bit, but I'm going to share this. So let me go back a slide. Can I do that? Yes, I can. There we go. Let me go back a slide. So everything which happens before you ask. Now, this is even before, and I've talked about doing presentations and webinars and delivering it via a webinar. Even before somebody gets to the webinar is where all of this starts. So when I design a webinar, when I do live presentations, I know all the key pieces I need to put into that presentation to move somebody who is effectively cold, as in they don't know me, they know nothing about me, to put the position where they trust me, they know me, they like me, they absolutely believe I can help them get the result I want. And then the offer I'm making, they go, well, that's just the icing on the cake. Thank you very much. I'm taking it. I can do that. Bring that online in a situation where we are now, where every niche is absolutely cluttered and crowded. And there's obviously all sorts of people complaining about all sorts of things. Then it's not just the content of that webinar presentation. It's everything that happens before they arrive on that webinar presentation. So everything that happens before they arrive on your video sales letter. Like I've seen, over the last few weeks, I've seen a good friend of mine. He ran a course on copywriting with somebody who's, one of the top copywriters, as far as I understand. But again, it's like I don't want to be a downer on that. But copywriting ain't your problem. Like if you want to be a full-time copywriter, as in you want to write for other clients, then fantastic. You want to get brilliant at copywriting and brilliant at being able to write a letter or translate it into a video that takes somebody that's absolutely cold, warm them up, and give them an offer that makes them go, I want that. And I guess that's like the Agora model. That's what they do, a lot of that. But understand, Agora are quite happy to wait 6 months to see a profit. So, if you've got those kind of deep pockets, great. But here's the other side. I'm not a great copywriter. I'm okay at best. But where I excel is this. Everything that happens before you ask. I'm really good at that, because there's one key element in all of this, which is if I can do things invisibly, and by invisible, I mean tell stories. So stories are my strategic advantage, because human beings love stories. So that's your first, I'm going from big picture, and we're going to chunk down into the content of that. So if we start with everything is about stories. Why? Very simple. Stories engage people. Human beings have been telling each other stories for the last 100,000 years. So our brains have developed for stories. We love stories, pre-written word. We didn't sort of evolve from apes into cave people. And then as soon as we got into a cave, went, woohoo, let's create PowerPoint. That didn't happen. But certainly we drew on caves, we drew art, we drew pictures. And then out of that, we started telling stories. So our brains evolved for stories. People love stories. And I remember, this also ages me, but when Tony Robbins was doing his power talks, I don't think he does them anymore, but when he was doing his power talks, they were all on tape. They were originally on tape in the early days. I mean, now I think most of them probably been reproduced on YouTube, but they were all on tape. And I had a subscription, so I'd get these things every month. And one of them was a guy called Bernie Siegel. So he was doing an interview with Bernie Siegel, who's a doctor. Brilliant interview, absolutely superb interview. And it was one of those defining moments for me, because Bernie Siegel started working with supposedly terminally ill clients. And he'd got to the point, like a lot of doctors, I've heard a lot of doctors say this, particularly in the States, where they feel that they're just legalized drug pushers, but it wasn't helping. It wasn't making a difference for the patient. It wasn't helping save lives. So they were looking for an alternative way to support people and to help them and to have an impact. And Bernie Siegel started doing this, and he started finding different ways to help people. But then, of course, at the medical conferences, he'd go along and say, look, and he started by saying, look, I did this, and this with this patient, their cancer disappeared. And what did the doctors in the audience do? They told him he was an idiot, he was wrong, he was stupid. And, they just couldn't wrap their head around it, because it went against absolutely everything they believed. So what did he do instead? He didn't start saying, I did this, this, and this. He just told stories. So by telling the story of the patient, nobody complains about a story. And that was his big thing. He said, nobody argues, nobody gives me a hard time if I tell a story. So there's a key element there. Not only do we love stories, within a story, we will happily, I think the word is critical response or something like critical thinking response, or critical bypass. That's the word, critical bypass, where it bypasses our conscious awareness, if you like, our faculties consciously, where we might challenge something or go, oh, I don't believe that, or I do believe that. So stories allow you to bypass that and go straight to the subconscious. So somebody's wrapped up in the story isn't really processing what the story is about in terms of the critical aspects of it. They're just accepting it. So they're more receptive to it. So the story is very, very, very powerful. So what we want is, what stories do we tell up front, even before you ask somebody to come on a webinar, even before you ask somebody to opt in any way and give you their email address, before you do any of that, it's like you want to be telling stories. Now, so this is where we go further upstream. So what I've done since I've come online is I've learned and realized I need to go further and further and further upstream. And this is where we get to. So let me just bring the next slide up, because I think this is important. Right. Think of it in terms of your customers. The ideal customers for you want to believe you can help them. They want to feel that they belong to something. That makes it incredible. People believe they're part of a community, and more importantly, part of a community which stands for something. Even more importantly, more powerful, if you can do it, stands for something bigger than themselves and their goals. And they want to bond. They want to bond with you so that they can know, like, trust you. So if you can encapsulate all of those three things, and I deliberately did it this way, believe, belong, bond, because now you got 3 B's. Put B cubed in your notes. So this will help you remember it. So we want to tell stories that encapsulate this. We want to tell stories for the simple purpose of getting people to believe in us, getting people to feel like they belong to part of our community, that they belong to something which has a bigger mission than just achieving their goals, and that them achieving their goals in their life actually supports the bigger mission. Like, for example, I'm going to tell you this straight. I'm not going to tell a story. I'm just going to tell it straight so you get it. I'm on a mission, very much so, to help coaches, people who are very impact focused. So they're very much in a position where they want to make a difference to people's lives, and that's a priority over profit for them. But they don't necessarily do well because they're so focused on making a difference. Like I was in the early days. Like early days, all I was cared about was making a difference. I would help people, try and help people as much as possible, but wasn't making any money out of it. So how long could I keep continuing? You get to a point where it's like, hold on, I've still got to pay my bills, you know. So anyway, so I want to help people who are more impact focused than profit focused. And I want to show them that they can have an impact, make a difference, and make incredible amounts of profit as well. But they're the people I want to focus on. Because if you look at, I mean, I study a lot of the online marketeers, the people who are doing incredibly well. And, you know, from a modeling point of view, like I look through that modeling filter at what they're doing. But a lot of them, some of the most successful marketeers, and I'm not naming names because it's not important. I'm not no judgment about this, but some of the most successful, some of the ones, and particularly those who can jump from niche to niche to niche to niche to niche and just make money in all niches, they're very money focused. So they're not as concerned with making a difference or having an impact or leaving a legacy. They're very much money focused. So it's easy for them. So their tools, they're using the tools, and we can use the same tools, but they're using those tools purely selfishly to make a profit. Now, I've got no judgment about that. That's fine. That's good. But what I'm saying is some of those tactics, one, don't resonate, as in for people who want to make an impact because they feel that some of them are a bit yucky and they're not comfortable with them. And also, they don't necessarily allow them to create as big an impact as possible, because the tactic itself is good for making a profit short term, but it's not necessarily good for having an impact long term. So I'm very much want to help the people who want to make an impact. So coaches, consultants, whether you're packaging it in an information product, whether you want to do coaching, whether you want to do consulting, that's fine. But it's like, I'm more interested in people who want to make an impact. And I want to help those people be more successful in business, be more successful at reaching the ideal clients for them, be more successful at making more profit for themselves so that they have a great life, so they can reach more people and impact more people's lives. So we've got this big ripple effect. And that's really what I'm about. So that's where I'm at as a mission. So then within that, it's like, okay, that's my mission. And then here's where it gets interesting. The little picture on here, I've deliberately put like a little superhero, you know, so Superman, you know, kind of like runs into his phone box and gets changed. Because invisible influence is literally deciding, most importantly, what you stand for, what you stand against, what you want to be known for, and what you want to be known as. So I would suggest you write these down. What you stand for, what you stand against, how you want to be known, what you want to be known for, and what you want to be known as. So there's 4 questions in there. What do you stand for? What do you stand against? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to be known as? You want to answer those 4 questions. You want to then wrap them in stories, and then you put those stories out to your audience. Because get that right, you will attract the best clients for you. You will repel the worst clients, the people you don't want to work for. And so and within that, like to be, for example, actually, let me start with the superhero. I was talking to Anne-Marie last night about, I was explaining this. I said, Disney have nailed this, or Marvel have nailed this. I said, so, you know, think of Iron Man. What's he known as? He's known as Iron Man. What's he known for? He's known for the tech, the gadgets, like the incredible level of intelligence that allows him to do all this clever research and the tools that he has available to him to create these incredible things, to have this suit which allows him to be Iron Man. What does Iron Man stand for? Looking after, being one of the good guys, looking after people, fighting against, for the most part in the films, they end up fighting against the alien invaders and things like this, but fighting against the bad guys to protect the good people. In other words, fighting for the people that can't necessarily fight for themselves. So that's what he stands for. And then there's a set of values in that. I mean, obviously the Marvel comics are very American, so that it sort of feeds into the sort of American values, of the American dream, standing up for everything that's good, apple pie and all that kind of stuff. But it feeds into that. So it's all about standing up for that and standing against them for anything that isn't that. Now, also with Iron Man, or certainly the way, if you look at the way Robert Downey Jr. played it, Robert Downey Jr. very charismatic and has a great sense of humor, very irreverent sense of humor to a certain extent. So there's a sense of fun about him as well. There's a sense of rebel about him. So he appeals then to rebels, people who want to do things that aren't the norm, that aren't the average, that don't live by the normal rules that most people live by. So there's that rebel element that he attracts to him. His fun side means he attracts people who like that sense of humor, who like that sense of fun. So then he repels the people that don't like that. Like, I don't get to work with people that wear suits and ties because I don't want to. So I never put out a message that would in any shape or form or ever tell a story that would attract those kind of people to me. I deliberately don't want those people. In other words, I want to repel them. I want those people to not like me. Does that make sense? But the very fact that I can repel them allows me to be even more attractive to the people that I want to attract. Like the name, Strategic Rebel, that's not an accident. It was like I'm literally putting a name to this. And then within that, obviously, my sense of humor, my sense of fun, I want all of that to come through. I find that easier live than recorded. I mean, that's my weakness. I'm a people person. I like to see people's faces. But as much as possible, I want to inject that in. So there's all that. So it's like literally, can you develop stories? And there's a whole thing to this, and this is one of the things I've been helping, particularly one of my friends at the moment. I'm really helping him with this because I actually set him an exercise. I said, look, start this process. And I gave him some questions. I gave him some examples. I said, go start this. And we're going to then take your answers and we're going to create stories out of them. Now, just to give you an idea, right at the beginning, when I first sat down with him, and he said, would you help me with this? And I said, oh, yeah, sure. And I said, look, something we can do straight away is, have you got a video of you talking about anything, like just sharing an idea? And he goes, oh, yeah, I've got a couple of clips. And I looked through them and I said, this one's great. And it was a 4-minute clip. I said, let's take this. And I said, we're just going to run this. I said, we're going to use this on Facebook. You're going to put $100 behind it. That's it. You're going to spend $100 and we're going to get X thousands of views typically for this. And he's like, what do I want to do that for? He's like, are we making an offer at the end of it? Are we making some money? I said, no. All we're doing is starting to build an audience. All we're doing is this. We want to start the bonding process as soon as possible. And the clip I'd chosen, he told a brilliant story in it. So it was story-based. That was important. And it was a great insight in the story as well. And it really reflected his values. Like, he's a very spiritual person. So it was video, massively important. It was him on video so people could see him. That was important because I wanted him to attract people like him. He's very spiritual. So therefore, the way he was explaining the story and the insight was coming from a very spiritual perspective. Who is that going to repel? People who are not spiritual. Automatically. Brilliant, because you don't want those people anyway, because they'd be a pain in the ass for him. So immediately we could do it and we start building a bond. And, I'm kind of sharing an idea of, it's like we're looking to build an audience in the beginning. So before we do anything else, let's just build an audience. And one of the ways to quickly repel people in the wrong way is just to ask for the money too soon. So if you see somebody, and you've all experienced this and you all hate it because everybody tells me, and they go to great lengths to tell me these stories, particularly on LinkedIn, where somebody said, oh, somebody connected with me and then immediately sent me a pitch in the direct messages, or immediately emailed me with a pitch, or immediately, sent me a text with a pitch. It's like, nobody likes it, and then you just end up pissing people off. That's not really the outcome at all. So what we want to do, let me bring this up. Sorry, I'm rabbiting away and I'm forgetting to be more engaging and be more paying attention to the comments. So, Rajesh, are these questions? So what do you stand for? Yeah, so what you stand for. What do you stand against? Absolutely. What do you want to be known for? And what clients do I want to attract? And what do you want to be known for? What do you want to be known as? Like Iron Man, that's what he's known as. He has a name. So it's that, like Thor. Thor is known as Thor. And then it's like, what does Thor stand for? What does Thor stand against? So you want to really get clear on your answers to those questions. Then we want to wrap them in stories. And by doing that, of course, you can start to attract to yourself the people you want and start to repel the people you don't want. We can also do a lot in terms of actually making the sale long before you ask for the money. Because I'll throw this in as well. I haven't really got a lot of time to go into it, but I'm going to throw this in, just seeding. Like inside your stories, if you can share, it's almost like a third party, like a third party referral. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I actually wrote a report called The Credibility Crisis. And I've been digging out my notes actually because I'm thinking of using some of the content in there. I think it's relevant to what I want to do at the moment. And in there, I talked about how in the early days, I had a good friend of mine. He's a really, really good friend, like a brother. He was my best man at my wedding. And in the early days, he was a financial advisor. And I helped him change his business, basically. I asked him a couple of key questions, and he completely changed the nature of his business, which allowed him to make more money, work with people that he only wanted to work with, and actually have more time off. So he was very pleased about it. And then on the back of that, he recommended me to a few people. Now, here's what was interesting. When he referred me to other people, or other people said, something, and he goes, I know exactly the person you need to talk to. Come and talk to my friend Paul. Then they would turn up literally with checkbook in hand. There was no, I didn't need to sell. They were ready to pay. It's like whatever it was. And I think, at the time I got to a place where I was doing these breakthrough session things with people, and I was charging about £2,000, and people would turn up literally with checkbook in hand. Here's the £2,000. Let's do it. So it was interesting for me because it also got me thinking about, okay, what's the difference? Like if I just approach somebody and said, I do this thing, and I've got this thing, and it's, it's £4,000 or £5,000 or whatever it might be. And they go, I'm not sure about that. Whereas if Steve had referred somebody to me, they turn up and go, Steve says this, and this. I don't care what it costs. I want to do it. And I go, yeah, it's £5,000. They go, oh, great. What's the difference? And that really got me thinking. And that's what started me on this as well, because this is part of that. This is like, how do you create that kind of third-party referral without necessarily having a third-party referral? You do this. You start really clearly defining what you stand for, what you stand against, what you want to be known as, and what you want to be known for, and you wrap them in stories. That's the key piece. So it's the content of the stories needs to reflect the questions, the answers to the questions, but they need to be in stories. So how do you create your own personal story? Ultimately, you got to sit down and start thinking about, you got to answer those questions first, because you don't have one personal story. You have loads of personal stories. One of the things I would say is, like, one of the things I learned from Milton Erickson, the Milton model of hypnosis, is this idea of universals. And it works very well both in hypnosis, and it works very well from a teaching perspective as well, is can you share a universal experience? So for example, what are some of the experiences that you have had that pretty much everybody on the planet's had? So that could be, certain things in childhood, or certain people that were a key influence in life. Like my granddad was a big influence in my life. So my granddad used to talk about the cream always rises to the top, so I have a whole story I've developed around that. But that's a universal experience because most people have had a granddad. Most people can, or even if they haven't, they can relate to it, or they can relate to, if I tell the full story, they could relate to the type of man he was and why he was such an influence to me. And they could almost imagine he was their granddad. Does that make sense? So that's a universal experience. So you want those because universal experiences allow you to connect. Like we connect with people we have things in common with. So you might not have, like if I stood up and said, oh, look, I built a business and I did this amount of money in a year and, went on to do this amount of money in a month, blah, blah, blah. And you go, wow, that's impressive. I've never done that. What an arrogant jerk. That could happen quite easily, which is why I don't do that. But if I want to be known as somebody that can help someone get that, a 6-figure or a 7-figure result or a multiple 7-figure result, then it's like, can I wrap that in a story in some way? Can I turn it into a universal experience so that I connect with people so that they know, like, and trust me? And then I can build credibility on top of that so that they actually, then by the time I get to the point where I say, actually, I can help you do this, they're already wishing I can help them do this. So they're waiting. They're going, I hope he's got something for me that I can get a piece of this. I can get in on this. I can, obviously buy from him so that I can actually get his help. You want that. So before you even get to the money, it's all that invisible influence. So in terms of creating your own personal story, you've got loads of stories. You've got a whole life full of stories. You've got all sorts of experiences. But like, go through it, because the experiences you're looking for are experiences that give you insights that you want to share. Like I've shared story structures before, like I have this whole thing of chain of events leads to an insight. And so I have that as a structure for stories. And if you look at Joseph Campbell's work where he talks about the hero story is a big story which is the theme of pretty much every successful Hollywood story follows the hero story. But actually, if you break the hero story down, it gets even more interesting because within the hero story, there are other themes for stories. Like good versus evil is a common theme. Look at all the Iron Man stories. Look at all the Avengers Thor stories. Look at the Avengers all together. All the storylines, good versus evil, good versus evil, good versus evil. That's a common theme inside the hero's adventure. So that's a common theme. So is there a good versus evil? Is there a good v bad story from your life that you want to tell, or that you could use to highlight good versus bad? Because that would tie into good, what you stand for, bad, what you stand against. Does that make sense? So you're looking for literally shaping the experiences you've had in your life, pulling out elements where they could be, are these universal experiences where other people would have had a similar experience? Like, for example, this is not as universal worldwide, but in the Western world, pretty much everybody understands Christmas. So pretty much everyone understands waking up on Christmas Day and the presents and opening the presents and the excitement of opening something. So that's a mainly universal experience. Obviously, I had a friend of mine, he did a presentation and he used to do a Christmas story in it. And then he did an event in Singapore where there was a strong Muslim community. So they wouldn't necessarily have had a Christmas experience. So he changed the story to suit the audience. So it's like he needed a universal experience. That wasn't going to be it. So he changed it. I think he ended up doing more of a birthday type story because he felt that that would have more of a chance of being more of a universal experience. I don't remember whether it did or not, but anyway, that was his thinking. So, but it's that thing. You're looking for things that have happened in your life that have shaped your beliefs. Like this could go further. Like I am on the clock. I've got a time limit here. But I wanted to get this idea across. The most important thing I wanted to get across was this idea of you want to answer those 4 questions. You want to wrap them up in stories to deliver them. And you want to start sharing them immediately, like as soon as possible. It's like literally one of the most powerful things you can do is take a good story with some good insights in it that is your universal experience wrapped inside the story that helps highlight what you want to be known for, what you want to be known as, what you stand for, what you stand against. You want to be able to wrap all of that up in a sequence of stories or a single story and just start sharing it. And if you were to take that on video and literally, like you can do this on Facebook, you can do it on YouTube, do it on any advertising platform, you could literally put that you could run it as an advert where your advertising objective is just to build an audience, is just to get views of it. Yeah, it possibly does sound complicated at this point because I'm going further than I intended to, so I haven't mapped it out as a sequence of steps for you. So let me roll back a little bit. It's like stick to those 4 questions for now. Obviously, this is a bigger topic than a simple live. Stick to those 4 questions. Answer those first. Think of superheroes. So I've given examples of Iron Man, Thor. Think of any of the superheroes from Disney, from Marvel, from who's the other side? Superman and Superman, Batman. That's different. DC Comics. So you could look at any of those. They all have the same key elements in them. So they all have how they want to be known. So they have a name. They all have what they stand for. They all have what they stand against. They all have a superpower. So obviously Batman and Iron Man, they're both into tech. Thor has his hammer and he has, certain superpowers which are bestowed on him because he's a god. So all this kind of thing. Superman has his power because he came from another planet. So they also all have an origin story, like where they came from. So what's your origin story? So build that in as well. But start just layering this. I am going to make this simple because that's one of my gifts very much is being able to take complicated and make it simple. But in what I wanted to share today, I really wanted to get to that place of invisible influence. These are the key takeaways for today. Invisible influence is everything that happens long before you ask for any money, way before. The core strategic objectives of that is to build know, like, and trust, credibility that you can deliver on a result that they want, that you attract the people to you that you want to work with. So that's where the what you want to stand for comes in, that they also believe in similar things, that the things to the people you want to repel stand for something else. So what you stand against would therefore repel them. You want to bring that into it. I will say as well, this takes work. Like when I first did this, I spent a week answering those 4 questions. And even this last week, I've been going, because I think I mentioned something I started in motion a couple of weeks back where it was like, okay, what do I want to do next? What opportunities do I want to take advantage of? What's going to give me the most fun? What's going to allow me to have the most impact? What's going to allow me to make a good profit? I started asking those questions in terms of what's next for me. And out of that, I then started revisiting all of this again. Because it's like, okay, if I'm going to go into either the same niche with something new or into a new niche, then I need to be very clear what I want to do, what I want to be known as, what I want to stand for, what I want to stand against, so that I can start developing that now. And that's what I've started. So yes, if you haven't already guessed, I am going to ultimately develop a program around this. And I'm, in beta mode, I'm probably going to take a handful of people, let's, I don't know, 10, 20 max, and take them on a journey with this, where I'm basically going to help them. It's like my goal within that is that idea, that in-between part where you're going from, I've got an idea, I've got a set of skills. So coaches particularly have a set of skills, whatever they do, whether it's mindset, whether it's marketing coach, whether it's, fitness coach in some way. They typically have a set of skills that are very valuable. What they don't know is how to build that business around it and how to get traction with their campaigns. And so all of this matters. So I want to help them do that. So I'm calling it in my head. This is kind of a working title in my head of, I want to get them agency ready. In other words, I want to get them to that place where if they did want to use an agency to scale everything, an agency would take them on because everything's in place, everything's proven, everything's working. If they didn't, they could obviously just continue doing it on their own. But that's kind of how I'm thinking about it as an outcome. So it makes sense to me, even though it might not make complete sense to you yet. But I will be sharing more about this. So key things, answer those 4 questions. Start thinking about stories. Simple structure for stories is start with the insight you want to share. So if I was saying, okay, I want to share a breakthrough moment. So for example, I might say, look, the key to being successful online today is invisible influence. So that would be my aha moment. So then I go back through what's the chain of events that led me to that aha moment. Well, the chain of events is going all the way back to I set out to make a difference to people's lives. I wanted to do that one to many, not one to one, because I've only got one lifetime. So that all becomes part of the story. And then within that, obviously, I then decided, okay, let's run some adverts to get people in a room. And it bombed. That's part of the story. So that led me to that first insight of, well, how do people make a buying decision? Then that led me to, okay, getting invited to multi-speaker events. So that's another story. And then that gave me the insight of, actually, if there's multiple speakers, not only do people are making a buying decision, they're also deciding which person to buy from. So how do I stand out? How do I stand out in a way that's positive, that's a way that allows me to work with the people I want to work with, but not the people I don't want to work with? That got me down all of this stuff, invisible influence. And then when I came online, that became even more important. So that's where all of this comes from. And those are all the stories that lead to that insight of invisible influence matters. It matters more today than it's ever done. It is more important than copywriting. Copywriting will not give you what this can give you. See, you can go down the path of thinking you need to be a great copywriter. You don't. You need to just be good at invisible influence. So you don't have to be a master of it. You don't have to be an expert at it. You just have to be competent at it. Because that's all I am. I'm competent. I certainly don't consider myself a master of it. But can I teach it? Absolutely. Do I need a bit of time to break it down into steps so I can make it easier for people to understand and use? Absolutely. Can I coach them through it so they get a great result? Absolutely. All that's coming. So that's where we're at. Hopefully that has been of some value to you. So yes, anything that's new, Rajesh, is going to sound complicated because it's new. But once you break it down, okay, let's start with these 4 questions. Do it step by step. It's like a recipe. If I just said, here's a cake, you go, well, that sounds complicated. It's like, yeah, of course it is, but there's ingredients, there's pieces to it. So start at the beginning and have a little bit of patience, because I don't expect you to have answers to all of these questions immediately. As I've just said, hopefully I've set an expectation. It took me a week. Literally, I sat down and went through it. And then actually, in the early days, I came up with some answers, started with that, and then refined them. Because again, once you take action in the real world, you get feedback and you start to realize actually it needed to be narrower. Like my friend, when he first started, when he changed his business, he actually went from working with a certain type of client to working with a much more high net worth individuals. So his original thought was, well, I want to work with high net worth individuals. But then as he got into that, he met high net worth individuals who were a pain in the ass. They just weren't nice people. So he refined it again. So it became high net worth individuals who actually were, in his case as well, were spiritually minded. So there's a certain topic, certain things he liked to talk about that he loved talking about. And he wanted people who shared that kind of stuff. Like, for example, this was not him, but as an example of what I mean, the video, The Secret, the DVD, the film, the documentary, The Secret, that came out, I don't know how many was it, 10 years ago now, maybe longer. And, it was all about this idea of, being focused on what you want. And if you could visualize it, then you could attract it to you. And it went ballistic. People love that kind of stuff, and so there's an element of that. It's like, do you want to attract people like that? So in some ways, I like people like that because they're optimistic and they're hopeful. But if I just said, well, I want to attract people to me who like The Secret because they're hopeful people, they tend to be great people, they tend to be interesting people. But actually, as you attract people like that, you discover that they fall into two categories. There's people that think all they've got to do is visualize and somehow it's going to magically appear. And it's like, that hasn't been my experience. So then you refine it a little bit. Well, actually, it's people that like that kind of stuff because there is an element of truth to it in the sense of you do need to be clear what your vision is because it's hard to hit a goal you don't have. But also at the same time, they need to recognize you might need to put some work in at the beginning because I'm sure if we were all enlightened beings, then we could click our fingers and we could have anything, but we're not. So for the mere mortals amongst us, we can visualize, but we also need to do a little bit of work. So it was like, there needs to be a plan in place. There needs to be strategies like this. There needs to be tactics that we follow, so it was all of that as well. So that helps. So 1, don't expect it to be perfect straight out the gate. 2, spend time thinking about these questions. 3, if you really want a good, solid understanding, go watch any Avengers movie because Disney does this brilliantly. And then, yeah, of course you have to take action. Yeah. So just get started there. And then any questions, by all means, put your questions below. Anything as you go away and you start thinking about this and you start trying to answer it and you come up with a question, again, come back and put it on this post and I will come back to it because I want your questions. I want to kind of find out, I guess you're helping me to help you. Like if you, in some ways, can help me to understand some of your stumbling blocks with this, some of your challenges with this, then that will help me develop this out as well. So there's a benefit to both of us. So go do that. You'll start moving forward. I will answer your questions and we'll see where we end up at. But the key thing is, I absolutely know that all of this invisible influence is critical these days, absolutely critical. And it's the key area that people aren't. And I'm quite happy for people to want to go down other rabbit holes and, want to get better at selling or get better at handling objections or get better at sales letters. Like, that's all fine. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But in terms of bang for your buck, return for your effort, this will give you a bigger return. All right. So that I'm gonna wrap up. I'm gonna move on out. It's Friday. I'm almost done an hour. I really hope you've enjoyed this. If you've enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed sharing it, and also I appreciate that towards the end, I kind of done the bit I wanted to do. So it did. I know I appreciate it sounded complicated. That is not me. I'm very much about making complicated simple. So you've reminded me that's also what I stand for. So I will go work on that. Yes. Your mission, should you accept it, is to spend the weekend watching Avengers movies. Oh my gosh, I've got to sit down on the couch and watch it on a big screen with coffee and cake. Yes, you have to. It's a must. The Stoics would be proud too. All right, so go do that. And actually, funnily enough, on this final thing, when I used to run NLP programs, I ran them in chunks. I do 3 days, have a couple of weeks, 3 days. So I didn't run them as one event. And in between, I used to set movies as homework because there's specific messages and themes that I wanted people to pick up. So yes, watch the Avengers movies. All right, I will see you next week. Any questions, I said, please, if you do some of the work and you get stuck, either email me or leave a comment below, and I will go away and work further on this because I plan to take 20 people through this and really help them nail it so that they get agency ready. They have a funnel that works. They have a product that sells. They have advertising messages. They know exactly what they stand for. They attract the right clients. We're going to rock the world with this because I really want to make a difference. I'm excited about this. All right. Yeah, I like Mission Impossible as well, but, stay on focus for the time being. You must watch Avenger movies. If you don't watch Avenger movies, I will send Iron Man round to your house to slap you. How about that? All right. Catch you all again. Cheers. If you've enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed delivering it, please share it with somebody that you feel would benefit from it as well, that would get value from it. All right. I'll talk to you again. Cheers then.